Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Atolagbe, and in today's video I'm going to be giving you everything I consider to be essential to get when you want to start sewing. We all know there are lots of tools and equipment and sewing, but if I were to start sewing today, what would it be important for me to have, right? And that is what this video is going to be about. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video, and let's get started. Firstly, you need a patterning system. The body is three-dimensional and fabrics are usually two-dimensional. So you want to convert your flat patterns into something that can fit around the human body. And so because of that, you're going to need to cut them into different pieces and geometries in order to achieve what you want to achieve. So I hope that makes sense. And in order to do that, there are three ways that I think that a person can have a patterning system. You could be someone who draws directly on the fabric. You have measurements and then you plot them on a fabric and you cut right off. I have videos in which I have done that. And secondly, you could just make patterns on physical paper or even digitally. As for the digital pattern making, I have not been getting into that, but if you need tutorials upon tutorials on physical pattern making, I have loads of them on this channel, so definitely look around. I think I would have a playlist linked in the description box. And lastly, you can buy ready-made patterns and utilize them for yourself. I think that patterns are very powerful and you can easily modify them into many different shapes and even sizes. I'm definitely in favor of pattern making over all the others because pattern making gives you the flexibility to be able to make whatever you want compared to ready-made patterns in which you might still have to modify the sizing and sometimes they might still not come out perfectly. That said, I think that preferences are almost a cultural thing in the world. I know that people in this part of the world, in Nigeria, we tend to mostly draft directly on fabric, followed closely by pattern making directly on the paper, and then we have the others following. And I honestly doubt that the market for PDF patterns exists. If it does, I think it must be very minimal, but tell me in the comments if I'm wrong. So the next thing you need is a cutting tool. Like I said, this is an essential list, right? And so I'm just going to give you the two cutting tools that I use and that I think if you're starting as a basic sewer, that's all you need. You need a pair of scissors and you need a rotary cutter. You know what? You only need a pair of scissors, period. You only need a pair of scissors or maybe two pairs of scissors. Now, among scissors, there are so many different types. The pinking shears that reduce fraying at the edge of a fabric. We have like bending scissors and all of that, depending on the needs of the person who's using them and also just the sophistication of the practice. But I think that any basic sewer who's just starting to sew can just get regular scissors. That's what I have used for a long time. It works. Okay, now this is my scissors. I also have a black one and together they both do the work for me. One tip that everyone seems to agree on is to refrain from using your fabric scissors for your paper because apparently it makes the blade dull, although I almost always make that mistake, but it's not ideal. Also, I have my rotary cutter, which I've made a video on before as part of another list like this. So check it out if you want to hear me talk about it. The third thing you're going to need is a measuring system. Now, in its basic form, all you need is a tape rule. You're going to find that you can do so much by just having a tape rule as your only measuring tool. The tape rule is honestly all you need, but if you want to take things up a notch, just a very small notch, then I suggest that you also get yourself a ruler and a pattern master. This does so much. It has a wide range of curves and also a ruler at the side. So that's what I would recommend. You can also get a French curve and a hip curve as well. But if we're keeping this strictly to basics, just get a tape rule, get a ruler, and get a pattern master, and I think that you should be good. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about are marking tools. I think that I have a couple of marking tools that I have tried, and so I'll be taking you through all of them, and I guess you have to decide which one you like. The first thing I have here is the good old tailor's chalk. I think that this is versatile. Honestly, I think that if this is all you have, then that's good. By the way, we're talking about marking on fabric. When it comes to marking on paper, a pencil is what is ideal. By the way, you should know that it's very important that the chalk be thin so that it actually makes tiny, thin, precise lines Chalks that are thicker than this are not so good because they just made wide markings and reduce the precision of what you're doing. Yeah, I'm sure you can see how thin it is. So get yourself a thin chalk and nothing else. The next thing I want to talk about are these fabric erasable pens. Oh my god. I'd always read about fabric erasable pens, and then I finally got these ones and I was so excited to try them, but they were disappointing at best. I don't like them because they make very light lines, and actually that's the point. They're supposed to make light lines that get cleaned off easily. But what I don't like about this is that not only are the lines light, the lines also spread so fast and it just removes precision from the picture. I've been wondering if I just have the wrong brand, in which case that would be good news. But if this is how they all work, then I'm not a big fan. The next thing I have here is this marking pencil. I like it. I actually like it. It glides easily on fabric, and sometimes I think that it can pass as a lip liner, but you know, I'm kidding. The last thing I have here is my chalk wheel. I've used this in a couple of videos. I love it so much. This tiny wheel here allows it to give very precise lines. The downside to this is that the chalk inside of it is in powder form, and usually what that means is that when you move the fabric even a little bit after having marked it, the chalk can just scatter all over the place and remove the precision that was its strong suit to begin with, if you get what I'm saying. So I like this for when you don't plan to move the fabric around and you just want to quickly make a quick stroke and you're going to cut immediately. So I like it. I think it's pretty. Right, the next thing is thread. There are different kinds of thread, different thicknesses and weights and materials of threads. Different thread types are ideal for different fabrics depending on the weight of the fabric, but I find that everything I've ever made, I've used the same basic popular thread that's sewn in the market, and it seems to work fine. But although I know it's not ideal, for instance, I know that when I'm making like a light fabric like chiffon, I'm better off with a light thread so that the weight of the thread does not overwhelm the fabric. But usually I just end up using the same thread for all of my projects, and like I said, I have no regrets on that so far, although I'll be open to actually matching the thread to the fabric in future projects. Now I want to talk a bit about pins. Pins are so important. You need pins. You cannot do without pins. Pins can be used to hold together a fabric while you're working on it. Pins can be used to, sometimes when you want to make stuff, you want to pin it together to see how the final result will look before you actually go over into sewing it with a sewing machine. For me, there are two types of pins that I use: the colored head pin and also just the straight non-colored head pin. Not much difference between them. The colored head pin just tends to be easy to identify when one is working, and also like in filming videos, the colored head pin makes it obvious that there's a pin there, right? So I think that is just for identification purposes. I'm moving on quickly to sewing needles. Sewing needles are also of different types, just like the threads, and there are different types of needles for different types of fabrics. Also, as far as needles are concerned, we have the hand sewing needle and we have the sewing machine needle, and that's where it gets tricky. I've only been using the needle that came with my sewing machine for a very long time now, and it seems to have worked quite nicely for every project that I have ever done. I've never had to switch it, well, except for when I've worked with a twin needle, which also came with the sewing machine. And by the way, I'll get to the sewing machine much later. I just have not had to change it, but suppose that I've worked with significantly elastic fabrics, for instance, I would have had to opt for a ballpoint needle in order to get desired results. So you want to make sure that you're using the right needle type so that your sewing turns out nicely. The next thing on my list is a sewing machine. This is so obvious, like really, unless you want to sew your own clothes with your hands, which is not bad. There was a time when people actually sewed with their hands and they made some very exquisite and nice things. It's unimaginable. And in high fashion houses, they still do a lot of hand sewing. So much hand sewing. So nothing wrong with that. That said, I use a Brother GS2700 sewing machine. It's an amazing electric domestic sewing machine that comes with some awesome features, like it has 27 built-in stitches. It has an automatic buttonhole feature. It has a built-in needle threader, and I know that that sounds abstract, but you see, some of those features have been lifesavers. They have just elevated my ability to do things faster and also with ease. For instance, I cannot remember the last time I peered into the eye of a needle in order to thread it, because the built-in needle threader just helps me to do that. And by the way, if you're feeling confused by anything that I'm saying and you want me to make a video reviewing that sewing machine and showing you some of the features, definitely make your request in the comments and I'll be sure to attend to it. Okay, but if you live in Nigeria where electricity is basically nonsense and light is not always regular, you can get the manual sewing machine. I think that that is even probably the most popular kind of sewing machine, and for good reason, right? It makes an amazing straight stitch. I'm not sure that it makes anything outside of a straight stitch. I think that that's its only disadvantage, really, plus the fact that you have to manually drive it with your feet. Another thing is that it's so big. My sewing machine currently, it's so compact that it can be out of sight and unnoticeable unless I'm actually sewing it. But when it comes to the manual sewing machine, they tend to be bulkier and they take up more space. The third category that you can buy, and which I don't think that you should be buying unless you have a factory, is an industrial sewing machine. Industrial machines usually serve one purpose per machine. So if you're like buying a straight stitch industrial machine, that's all it's going to do. But it's going to do it so well. If you're going to buying a button whole industrial sewing machine, is going to do that so well, so excellently, so perfectly, so flawlessly, because that's the singular reason why the entire sewing machine was built. Unlike my sewing machine, for instance, that does 27 different stitches, it doesn't do all of them to industry factory standard. Next thing I want to talk about is the seam ripper. Of course, you can always use a blade or scissors to open your seams when you make a mistake, or it doesn't even have to be a mistake. Sometimes that's the process to unravel the seam. You can definitely use a blade, I guess, but the truth is that seam rippers are made for the specific reason of unraveling seams very easily between two fabrics, and in such a way that the fabric is not harmed, especially if you've used it well. Blades come with a bigger risk to the fabric and to your own hand when you're using them, but a seam ripper is going to do just the job that you need it to do, to get rid of that thread in the middle. So definitely I think that a seam ripper is a preferable option to blades, and it looks nicer. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is an iron. You need an iron. Ironing is compulsory, and not just when the fabric is done, but every time you make a seam, you have to press that seam open before you make a counter seam. It's a rule, it's the game. It's the only way to have clothes coming out as nice as they possibly could. I don't even know what the brand of my iron is really. It wasn't branded, it's just this bulky industrial grade iron that I got some time back. So I want to give a honorable mention to bobbins. This is something that you wound your thread around and then you put inside the sewing machine, and then it relates with the thread from the top to create the loop that now becomes the stitches and the seams that we use in holding fabrics together. Yeah, so those are the things that I think that you need to start sewing. Let me know in the comments if you think that I left something out that should have been included on this list of essentials, and also make sure you subscribe to this channel and like this video and engage with my content. I'll see you in my next one.